For years, we've heard that Notre Dame doesn't have a shot at the very best recruits in the country. But this past weekend, Marcus Freeman showed he's changing the narrative. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Wednesday, March 20th, and thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, and now I'm a producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And this show is free and available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to like the video below and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, please take a second to rate the show 5 stars, leave a nice review, and subscribe there as well. Recruiting insider Brian Smith is going to join me momentarily to go in-depth on Notre Dame recruiting. Brian and I both believe that Notre Dame made significant strides with their Pot of Gold Day event on Sunday, but Brian picked up on a couple trends that I thought were very interesting. Check it out. All right, I'm joined once again by Locked On recruiting insider Brian Smith. And Brian, Notre Dame's Pot of Gold Day has been a big topic of discussion lately, not necessarily just around South Bend, but really throughout the recruiting world. This is the 4th year in a row that Notre Dame has put on this big event. But to me, it seems like they do it bigger and better with each passing year. So what's the biggest thing that stood out to you from this year's Pot of Gold Day?
Number one, you and I talked about it a minute ago. They're all in on going on after the elite talent. Just going to randomly mention that, but they're doing it early. What gets you early attention, more relationships. It helps you get away from the point most of the kids are offering are from down south, Texas, California. Like I think it's 15, 13, and 12 or something from like California, Texas, and Florida. They're recruiting the states that are furthest away from them. So you got a longer time to get over the relationships, do well with that. And be honest, like this is just polar opposite what I grew up with when I first got in the recruiting business 25 years ago. Like Notre Dame did a terrible job back in that era with this stuff. If you do not get in with kids early in today's society, you have no shot, especially when you're way up north. I mean, you went to school at Notre Dame, you know, it's not exactly the same culture as it is in Birmingham. So I'll just use an example. Anthony Tank Jones, he's a kid from St. Paul's Episcopal in Mobile. I've met him. I would take him right now. He's only a sophomore in high school. He's physically like ready to go play at an SEC school. Notre Dame wouldn't normally offer a kid like a top 10 kid in 26. That's heart of SEC country. Notre Dame's all in and going after it. Notre Dame is all in on major quarterbacks like Ryder Lyons from California. I've seen him. He is a dude. They're after Noah Grubbs. They're after Brady Hart. Both those guys coming to visit from Florida. They're all over the South. Don't care who's the leader. They go all in and they really go after these kids to take visits. That's just a different strategy. And if you don't do that now, again, being up north, like Ohio State does the same thing, just to put it in perspective. They do a tremendous job as well. And that's why they have success in Florida in particular. You got to get there early. Notre Dame has curbed the entire market. They've lapped much of the market in getting in early. I still don't think anybody has more commitments in the class of 25 than Notre Dame. The way they're pushing, it may be a little different than 26 because they are flat just going after elite kids. As an example, like arguably the number one player in Louisiana in 26 goes to Catholic in Baton Rouge. It's like 5 minutes from LSU. Notre Dame's all in on recruiting him. That's not an easy endeavor. Some of the prior coaches 20, 25 years ago might have taken a pass on that because it's too hard. I love this. Notre Dame is supposed to be hard. I'm sure you can talk to that academically as a former student, but it's supposed to be hard in a lot of other ways too for the coaches. This is how you win big. You go after elite players, you do it early, you build relationships, you get them on campus. Notre Dame's doing it the right way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. That stood out to me, like the caliber of prospects that Notre Dame is after. It's definitely a little bit different. I think when Marcus Freeman was hired, a big part of the reason why was he was going to take recruiting to the next level, and that Notre Dame was going to be in the mix for all these elite guys a lot more. It has taken Marcus Freeman a few years to really dive headfirst in it. Why do you think he's doing that this year, or not necessarily this year, but with this cycle in 2026? Like, it seems like he's sort of eased into it now that he's been around the program for a few years. He's ready to start really early with like the top 10, top 15 prospects in the entire class. It just took him a few years to really start doing it.
I wonder if it's just continuity. He wanted to build a certain kind of culture. That's my guess. I don't have any insight into it. When I went through some of the list over the last day or so, I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's a guy that I see at Under Armour and like he's elite. Notre Dame's usually iffy with those kids because I'll just be blunt. Recruiting top 50 kids, the vast majority you are not getting without upfront NIL money, which Notre Dame is all out on for the most part, depending on who you talk to. So, I mean, that's a big debate and all that. So if they're going in on these kids, is there another reason? Have they changed? Have they got something to set it up to help once the kid immediately gets there? I have no idea. But if you're not going to offer the kid, well, you don't have a chance anyway. That's kind of how I've always looked at it. You might as well offer. If he says no, you're spending Notre Dame's resources, not your own, to recruit the kid. Who cares? So that's why I would recruit Anthony Tank Jones and Noah Grubbs and everybody else. You might as well go in on them. I like that they're building the relationship part, though. Like I heard something about Jones the other day that they're really after him and they're making a concerted effort. I know Noah pretty well, the quarterback from Florida. He told me Notre Dame was recruiting him harder than anybody when I met him again at the Under Armour camp in Orlando. He's got offers from school to country. Notre Dame recruiting a Florida kid like that tells you something. So I think they're just confident more than anything else. And adding the coordinators, getting them locked in, they know exactly what they want now, and they've had time to work together. And I think Denbrock knows Notre Dame. He hasn't been there in a while, but he knows Notre Dame, and he knows what he can get to. So that's probably a little bit of it as well.
Yeah, he gets the place, and I think the perception of Denbrock as a coordinator is really strong, especially coming off his tenure at LSU. He developed a Heisman Trophy winner. LSU had one of the best offenses in the country. Like, it's a big, big get for Notre Dame. And also the fact that Notre Dame went to LSU and took their offensive coordinator, I think, was a big deal to a lot of people. So sort of on that note, do you think that Freeman has changed the perception about Notre Dame to the high school recruits? Because he's been at Notre Dame for a few years now. He's been very aggressive recruiting since the moment that he got the defensive coordinator job. But we know that with some people, like older people, the perception around Notre Dame, it's not really changing, right? Like, people have their beliefs about Notre Dame. They're probably not going to change. But a lot of the high school kids, like, they don't really know about the tradition and all the stuff that Notre Dame has done in the past, and they haven't had enough success on the field lately to make up for that. But I think that what Marcus Freeman is doing, all of his actions have started to change young people's perception about Notre Dame, and maybe that has something to do with their aggressiveness in the class of 2026, where now he's kind of felt like he's done enough so that these younger kids recognize Notre Dame, or at the very least, maybe they just recognize Marcus Freeman.
I think Freeman's the key here because he actually enjoys recruiting and he puts the effort in. He builds relationships. I spoke with Dallas Golden the other day, and I asked him what was his best visit, just random question. He said Notre Dame. And I said, that kind of surprises me. Why? He's a Tampa kid. And he said, well, they had the guys out there in the leprechauns, and they just made it fun and really relaxed. And I'm like, okay, that's not what I expected you to say, because like old school Notre Dame would have never done that. So they just find ways to acclimate to today's athlete. Notre Dame has always tried to make people adapt to them, in my opinion. To a certain degree that works, but with certain kids, especially down south, that's iffy. So you have to find a way to find a middle ground. And I think it's a good reason they may get Dallas Golden and many other kids too that are elite players. And they've adapted to each kid, no matter where they're from, no matter their background, economics, etc. I think Freeman's the spearhead of it, but the staff has embraced it too. If you don't have a staff that wants to work in recruiting, you can have the greatest recruiter of all time, and it's not going to matter. So you got to give everybody. Chad obviously is a big part of that. Obviously, Bowden does a great job. But the entire staff's done a pretty good job with the recruiting too, and just finding ways to relate to people and bring the Notre Dame brand to them. And, I'm sure there's some history lessons there too. But Notre Dame's competitive again. They're playing physical football, and they've got some guys going to the draft. They have something to sell. So I'm guessing they're also saying you can be the final piece to get us over the hump.
Yeah, and it's a compelling pitch, and I think that Notre Dame has certainly sent a message to some other schools like programs in the SEC, even Ohio State, that all of a sudden Notre Dame has to be taken seriously on the recruiting trail in a way that they probably weren't taken in the past, just given their effort or just the reputation of the school and things like that. And I think the staff and, like you mentioned, Chad, and really everyone in the recruiting department, because the attention to detail in all of these offers and all of these pitches is really high level. And also, for all the advancement that Notre Dame has made with the staff and being willing to pay assistants, I don't think it's a secret that they don't have the pure number of people in their support staff. So that means more responsibility and more work on fewer people. But so far, they've done a really good job. And I made the point in yesterday's show that it's really hard for really any team at the top of college football to stand out in recruiting anymore, especially with guys who are being recruited by all the top schools in the country outside of like, hey, this school is offering double what this school is offering. But if, you're playing by the rules or at least attempting to, it's really hard. So how does an event like the Pot of Gold Day help Notre Dame separate themselves from the rest of the pack, even if it's just for a day?
I think it just shows that you're a special player because these kids talk to each other a lot. They go around and look at each other's Instagram feeds. They go around and look at their Twitter feeds. They find out through text messages, hey, who offered you? That's everything they talk about. They call it the O's. What O's did you get, etc. Notre Dame does it like in bunches. And if you're one of those guys on the Pot of Gold Day, it kind of signifies you as a step above. Now, they re-offer some kids that may have got an offer already, just so it, the moniker that shows the Pot of Gold or whatever, but it's still the same meaning. I think the kids just kind of like all the stuff that comes with it, the photographs and everything. They dig it. Some of the people that have been watching Notre Dame a long time could probably care less. I'm telling you, without this stuff, a lot of these kids ain't coming, whether you like it or not. That's just the age we're in.
I know, like when I saw Chad Bone running around in a leprechaun costume at first glance, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, what is going on here? And then I was like, wait a second, I'm old now. I'm not the target audience. This is not meant for me. It's meant for the kids. And if they like it, well, then I like it too. But you talked a little bit about it already, the quarterbacks. Notre Dame obviously just added CJ Carr. They have a commitment from Duce Knight, who I want to talk about a little bit later. Now they're being very aggressive recruiting the quarterback position in the class of 2026 as well. You mentioned a few of those names. Which of those prospects really stood out to you compared to the rest? Or maybe they're all relatively equal.
They're all awesome. It's just what do you want? I'll just kind of go in the order off the top of my head. Brady Hart's Cocoa High School, tradition-rich program, state champions, 6'4", 6'5", 180 something, can really move, can get out in space. He's a long kid, needs to add some weight, but great personality, could fit in at University of Pennsylvania, Notre Dame, Stanford, wherever he went. But he also understands being a gunslinger. Against a team by the name of St. Thomas Aquinas, if you know anything about high school football, they got some players. He threw for 498 last year on the road at STA. If you know anything about high school football, you don't need to go any further. That being stated, he was also pretty good at Under Armour, and he's a kid that has a lot of upside. Noah Grubbs is the more physically defined player. He's from Lake Mary, just north of Orlando. 6'3", 6'4", 215-ish, I guess. I'm not sure exactly where he's at, but he's put together. He's got a stronger arm, not as mobile. Tradition would say he's the kind of guy you would see at Michigan 25 years ago. Kind of a big pocket quarterback. He can move a little bit, but he's not as athletic as Grubbs. Then Ryder Lyons is a kid from California. He actually went to the Under Armour in Miami because he was going to miss the one in California because of vacation. Came down. He is as precise as it gets. That's another kid they love. All these guys would be great. It doesn't matter which one you take. They have very high ceilings. I don't know how you pick. Maybe it's just the first one that comes. But again, Notre Dame has done their due diligence. It's a really good quarterback class, by the way, in 26. And they're in on the best. So they've had these kids on campus, and they're going to continue to do so. Like Lyons is going to visit, etc. All these guys have either been or will be again on Notre Dame's campus.
I love this strategy. I love that Notre Dame is not taking a year off, so to speak, when it comes to recruiting quarterbacks, because I felt like there was, and this isn't just specific to Notre Dame either. Multiple schools were doing this. We're like, 1 year you get the top prospect, you get the top quarterback, and then the next year you don't really recruit another top guy because you're trying to appease the guy you got in the class before. That actually happened with Phil Jurkovec. They got him. He was supposed to be the savior. And then the following class, they recruited Brendan Clark. And, neither one of those guys ended up working out. But I just feel like that's not feasible in modern college football, given how frequently guys end up moving in the transfer portal. So I've always been like, hey, get a really good player every single year. Now, that's easy for me to say, right? I'm not the head coach that has to go into the living room of these guys and try to sell them on, hey, come to Notre Dame, even though I have Duce Knight currently committed in the class of 2025, who has an incredibly high ceiling, and I just signed CJ Carr. What's the message like? And this might not even be specific to Notre Dame, but for these top quarterback prospects in the country, it's a lot of the same schools. And I know that they're going to preach competition, but how do you sell a recruit knowing that there might even be a better prospect who's either already signed or currently committed in the class before you?
I think it's just about fit and relationships. That doesn't change. The kids are going to pick. I know no fans like to hear this. They pick the person in the polo, not the name Notre Dame or LSU or whatever on the polo. So that's first. And then second, they want to hear about development. They want to know they got a chance to make the NFL and they want to win. If you give them that, most of these kids, especially like when I was living in Florida, those kids fear no competition. Now they'll leave if they don't win, but they'll go wherever. So it's just, I don't think competition bothers them. Like, look at Alabama. Did they have a class outside the top 4 in the last 10 years? Good players want to play with good players. If your coaches get after it on the recruiting trail and truly build relationships, you win some, they'll probably come to play for your program. So Notre Dame needs to finalize and have a run in a playoff or something to kind of get to those Tank Jones and some of those guys down south. But they've done everything else. So they've laid the foundation now and they're building relationships early, like with the 26 class. But I don't think they really need to deviate all that much.
Brian and I still have plenty more to talk about regarding Notre Dame recruiting, but I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you about one of our newest sponsors, Bettor Together. Tired of the same old daily fantasy grind where you make a roster, cross your fingers, and hope for the best? Or are you tired of losing on the last leg of your pick'em entry? Introducing Bettor Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent and you can play with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So, grab a friend and join the social daily fantasy movement. Download Bettor Together from the App Store and sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a free $5 entry into any NCAA basketball contest. Remember the code LOCKEDON because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. This episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Outside of just extending a bunch of offers, Notre Dame did add a couple commitments on Sunday. Jerome Bettis Jr. finally committed in the class of 2025, and the Irish landed their first commitment in the class of 2026 in Dylan Faison, the younger brother of Jordan Faison. I don't think either of these guys move the needle a ton outside of Notre Dame, at least right now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Dylan? He's so young, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on him. But Jerome Bettis Jr., what's your evaluation on him?
He's unique because I saw him in the state championship game. He didn't do much. His team got bludgeoned by Thomas County Central. I mean, it's Georgia. You can get bludgeoned pretty quick in that state. The 6A state title game. But the quarterback was just running for his life. So I saw him at Under Armour, and he was pretty good. No worries about quarterbacks getting hit. Kind of helped him. He was good in some of the drills. He looked comfortable. He's about 6'3". He's a long-rangey kid. I just need to see him now in a game where he's playing against somebody that can't just destroy their front line, how he can operate in against a good secondary. So I think he has upside. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be an impact player. He's not, for people that wonder, like, he's built just polar opposite of his father. He's long and lean. Like, literally, except for the face, you would never think they were related. Not 1 ounce. It is what it is. But long and lean kid, has some athleticism. Need to see him kind of finalize. But he's got potential to play at the Power 5 level. I just don't think he's an impact guy.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's an impact guy at wide receiver either. I think he's a good football player, but his speed doesn't really make it seem like he could be a really good guy out wide. But I don't know. He could still develop in time. But that does lead me to maybe a bigger question about Notre Dame's class of 2025. It's ranked number 1 in the country now. It's not going to finish that way. A big part of the reason why is because they have 18 guys committed. No one else that I can tell has more than 11. But they're after Derik Meadows. And things were going really well with him. Notre Dame was in on him early, and then he is actually expected to be back on campus this weekend for an unofficial, plus he has an official visit scheduled on campus this summer. If the Irish were to land him, he's by far the best receiver in their class and one of the best players in the class as a whole. How would you rank Meadows compared to some of those other top prospects? Like, how high are you on him compared to like a guy like Ivan Taylor or any other the top guys that Notre Dame has right now?
He's a really unique guy to rank because he plays for an elite program in Bishop Gorman out in Las Vegas. They don't have one, they don't have two, they have three elite offensive line recruits. So they just run the ball. So the receivers, they had one guy ahead of him anyway. The receivers don't get that much look because they just bludgeon people. And the state of Nevada is not a high school hotbed. It just is what it is. So they got to play a lot of out-of-state games. But he had like 15 catches last year. And then this spring, nobody really knew what he was going to do. And he came down to South Florida at the Battle 7-on-7 tournament. It's the biggest tournament of the year, and dominated. Wasn't good. He was dominant. And like, I got a picture of him taking the ball. Like, his waist is above the kid's head. And he's 6'5", 6'6", does all that kind of stuff in the moment, but he's very raw. Like, doesn't have enough technique at the line yet. Do I think he's an impact guy as is? Hell no. If you can't get off bump really consistently, that's what they're going to do. And he's a boundary receiver. But they'll teach him that no matter where he goes. Like, to put it in perspective for fans, Tennessee wants him. They know receivers. So that's a good sign. And again, you can't teach the frame. Like, he's yoked, 6'5", 6'6", 200 pounds, whatever it is. He's a guy that could be, I think, a second-year guy would be really good. And his upside's just through the roof. He can run in the open field. He can run away from guys. But it's just the physicality. Like, in a 50-50 situation, very few DBs have much of a shot.
Yeah, this would be a huge, huge get for Mike Brown. His first real big high-end prospect since he became the wide receivers coach at Notre Dame. So that's definitely going to be one to follow, starting with this weekend visit. But the guy who could potentially be throwing him the ball, Duce Knight. He is Notre Dame's crown jewel in this class. He's actually going to be back on campus this weekend as well for another unofficial visit. He's racked up several of those by now. And even though he has never wavered in his commitment, at least publicly, schools like Alabama and Ole Miss, which is his home state, Mississippi, they're pushing really hard for him to flip. Notre Dame hasn't really had a ton of success in these kinds of battles so far under Marcus Freeman. Guys like Keon Keeley and Peyton Bowen both ended up decommitting, and they flipped to different schools. Is Notre Dame doing anything differently this time around with Knight to ensure he signs with them on signing day as a way of learning from past mistakes?
I don't think it's so much Notre Dame. It's just the person they're recruiting / the people around them. I'm going to leave it at that. I can't go into a whole lot, but I mean, the people around you are the people that you are. And sometimes it's not even what you want it to be. So I think he has pretty good people around him. He's a kid that fits Notre Dame. I know Duce pretty well. And I know he told me to my face he wasn't going to take any visits this spring except for Notre Dame. That's the only thing I can tell you. Is Alabama going to stop recruiting him? No. Is Alabama appealing, especially to a Southern Mississippi kid? Yes. So will he take a visit? I have no idea at some point, but it would be best for Notre Dame if those schools all had quarterback commits and this and that. But like those schools down there do not like it when Notre Dame comes in and takes one of their kids. Like it's again, that's a North-South thing. That is real. So I'd be curious to see where we're at, say October, because Duce knows that Marcus doesn't like guys taking visits. And it's a little bit different for the quarterback. Like, you can't really even take unofficials if you're the quarterback. Fair or not, your light is different than everybody else's. It's part of the position. You signed up to play, that's position, throw it around, and you sign up for everything else that goes along with it. He's a pretty shy kid. And I mean, people, like when I was at Under Armour in Atlanta, and that's where he went, everybody's bugging him about it. And I was waiting my turn to talk to him. And he told the guy that I'm just going to visit Notre Dame, and I'm 3 feet in front of him. So, I mean, I heard it in my own 2 ears. So we'll see. But Notre Dame's just going after him hard as they can. I don't know what else they can do because he keeps coming back for visits. But it's a long way to December.
It is. And these are the type of guys that you want Notre Dame to be after. Like, if all these other schools really want him, that's a really good sign. I think my biggest concern when it comes to Knight is not necessarily him flipping. It's just where he's from. It's such a small town. And
I've been there.
what kind of competition is he facing in high school? Now, then again, I might have a question about that, and then I'll watch a video of him doing some crazy windmill tomahawk dunk in a high school game, and I'm like, maybe it really doesn't matter that much. He's just that special.
Well, the game I saw him play, it was against Picayune Memorial. It's one of the best programs in the state, and they got dudes. They got an offensive lineman that's a class 26 kid. He'll have 30 offers. Jamonte Waller just signed with Auburn. That was different. But Knight has like a 41.9-inch vertical. Like,
it's crazy for a quarterback.
Yeah. Like goofing around, he's a really good basketball player. That's not an easy sport to kind of take half-hearted and be an impact guy. He could go play Division I basketball. No doubt about it. Watching him run, like the team he was playing against was better than his team. There were a couple of plays where he was dead to rights, made a guy miss, and he just faster than everybody. I always tell people at the end of the day, like you get to the playoffs, like Kirby Smart's a great coach, right? Kirby will tell you it's not about me because the players 9 out of 10 times will beat the scheme. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's about recruiting. You ain't winning it unless you're recruiting at an elite level. Notre Dame's not quite there. That's just reality. This is the kind of guy that can change that because the quarterback gets the ball in every play. Duce Knight is a very important player, even if Carr ends up being the quarterback, because they could use him in packages until Carr turns pro after like his junior year. And then Duce Knight takes over as a junior, like gets a couple years to learn. But he is from a small town where, like, when I looked at the restaurants, when I went to that town last year, there weren't a lot of options that, people that are from Chicago would like necessarily. It's just down home country people, and they're real nice, but it's a small town out in the cow pasture. It's what it is.
South Bend's kind of a small town, so maybe he'll fit right in. Oh, Brian, this I know it's a little bit bigger. I'm probably underselling a little bit. We're running short on time, so feel free to promote anything on the way out.
Well, I hope that the next couple of weeks are good for Notre Dame with the unofficial visits. They should be. The next couple of weeks going into the spring game or when you set up kids for your officials, you should see, barring something unforeseen, Notre Dame get a bunch of OVs set up with Marcus Freeman. That's why you bring these kids in now. If you don't get them on campus now, you're not going to get them in campus in June. So this is really important.
All right, man. Always appreciate the time. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Auburn Tigers can only be described as a Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC. The Tigers knocked off the Florida Gators in the SEC Tournament Championship, and now they're set to make a run in the NCAA Tournament. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'll be back tomorrow morning, and the Friday mailbag returns this week. So if you've got questions, drop them in the YouTube comments below or send them in on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Last but not least, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. I'll see you guys tomorrow.